cognitive calories, cognitive load theory, transfer distance. These are where we get into the discussion of, this episode is where we get into the discussion of designing and considering your students' ability and investment, engagement, commitment, attention, going back to Schlechte in one of the earlier episodes, for traversing what Moore called the transactional distance. Let me give you a catchy title, sums it up in a sentence. Your kids, your teachers have a budget of cognitive calories. Spend them wisely. Ask them to spend them wisely. So, cognitive load theory, you're familiar with it, considering that there's only so much space you can take up in your processing and in your working memory. If something isn't in your working memory, it's not going to get into your long term. If it's not in your long term, learning hasn't occurred. So, cognitive calories makes sense. It's one of the things that I picked up from Bonnie Stewart and Greg Cormier's Online Learning in a Hurry. Unfortunately, they've taken down the K-12 edition. I'll link to the higher ed version that they still have up. But if you're not thinking about what your students are having to pay closest attention to, again, Schlechte, then they're going to pay attention to the surface features, not the deep stuff. If they can't pay attention to the deep stuff, they're not going to get their knowledge troubled. They're not going to cross over on those boundary crossings and on those threshold concepts even earlier. So, when you're looking at what this looks like in a face-to-face classroom, here's a parable. Kid comes in, college kid, comes in and sits down in the lecture hall. Professor says, no, don't sit there. Okay. Student gets up, moves to a different chair. Professor, no, don't sit there either. Okay. Odd, weird, but because these are unmarked chairs. But okay. Maybe there's a special event, something. Okay. Move very far away from where, right? Because most people want to be the good people, right? No, not there. So now what that student is mostly committed to, mostly paying attention to, is their frustration. Not paying attention to the chairs. Not paying attention to the professor. Definitely not paying attention to the content. Probably not committed to coming back to class. We say that when we're teaching new hires, when we're onboarding new employees, talking about the power of positive redirection and how just incredibly powerful it is to say, no, you instead sit in this other chair. Done. Wonderful. But I say all that to say this. Think about when you're building out your online course shell. Think about when you're putting up a word bank on your board because you're presenting about World War II on the Eastern Front. And Americans have a hard time spelling Slavic words that have been transliterated, let alone locating them on a map, right? One of the most oddest challenges we had when we were doing blended last year, when we were doing online the year before, was teachers not considering the design of their Google Classroom pages and the layout and organization of materials from the kids' point of view. At the very beginning, we had teachers just the newest things on top, and that's it. But if you have multiple things in a day, if you have a kid who's out for a day, if you have a kid who missed an assignment from a week ago and doesn't remember exactly which one it was, If you're looking to get the students focused on that expansive framing that says, think about the course more in terms of optimization and choices than it is Chapter 6, Section 3, changing where you're looking to have students spend those cognitive calories, where you're asking them to carry the heaviest cognitive load is essential. And making sure that that heaviest cognitive load is on the things that you're expansively framing, on the skills, declarative knowledge that you're looking for them to do, especially if you're asking them to take something in their prior experience, their prior understanding that that they know tacitly, and you're asking them to be able to articulate that. Now, if you're online, if you're at a distance, Moore in 1993 had this theory of transactional distance, which I think we pay too little attention to in face-to-face. The basic idea is that the more removed you are between your interlocutors in a conversation, the harder it is. Maybe you're separated by culture or time or distance or some combination or intentionality. In face-to-face, synchronous, right? You have micro expressions, you have facial expressions, you have all of the sorts of things in a communication medium that when you reduce things to print have to be replaced by emoji, sarcasm marks. How do you get humor across on a discussion board post, let alone a reply? And so when you're looking at cognitive calories, right? When you're looking at designing for the cognitive load, that means designing your scaffolds in place. And sometimes those are UI scaffolds when you're online because the medium requires some sort of tutorialization, like in a new video game. But considering the cognitive load not from your perspective, but from the perspective of the students traversing, who are looking to cross those thresholds for the first time, and minimizing whatever noise might be in the experience so that they can better pick up on the signal, which may be faint, right? They're not experts yet. They don't know quite yet how to pick up on those patterns. Designing for cognitive load, thinking particularly in the metaphor of cognitive load as cognitive calories, and where are you asking your students to burn those cognitive calories has been particularly effective when I'm talking with colleagues, whether or not we're talking about their distance, their blended, their online, their face-to-face. It's an essential thing.